Okay, this is going to be footage from job number 1. I had the GoPro for this one, but man, the thing was too high and you couldn't see everything that I was doing. I wanted to show you guys how to trim on certain types of rubber for sliders because, a lot of the new ones, they have like a really thin piece of rubber. So you can't see it that much on this one. I'm going to be talking through everything and how to do it, but I'm going to have another video that goes a little bit more in depth on like prepping around the edges, silicone or, it's pretty much, just silicone. Sometimes there's like paint and stuff if it's a new build. It really just depends. But that's what I'm doing for this. I'm trimming out all the little pieces of silicone just to make sure that, on the edges when I'm cutting the film that it's going to lay right. Because if you don't trim everything flush and you have some extra silicone pieces sticking out, it's not going to lay right. So now we're using our scraper. Just go around and, overlap the strokes, make sure everything's nice and clean. This is brand new glass, so fortunately it's not that dirty. Just going all the way to the edges. You definitely want to make sure that you're using the edge of the blade, to get kind of underneath the silicone a little bit. Just because there is going to be dirt that, is underneath when you spray the edges and wipe it off, that it can flush all that out before you spray it when you're about to put the film on. So this is why we're using the paper towels. Just the little extra pieces that kind of come off as we're trimming, and for the dirt that we're just wiping off the edges, making them nice and clean. Then we're going to give it another spray, and we're going to do one final squeegee. Sometimes, you miss a spot. You got to make sure you get everything. And a lot of times, like if I'm doing removal or something, I explained this on a previous video, but if I'm doing removal, there's a lot more potential to have little pieces of glue or just little specks on the glass. So if you spray it with just the water and you rub your hand over it, you're going to be able to feel everything. I don't need to do that with these because there's no removal, but it could be a good habit, that's for sure. Now we're going to be pulling a piece. I didn't have a ton of room in this house because you can't really see, but there's a ton of stuff on the floor behind me, so I'm kind of just making do with the space that I have. But if you're doing a lot of sliders at once, I would definitely cut all the pieces just to kind of alleviate this situation where you're prepping and then you're stopping and picking up one piece. But keep in mind, even though I just cleaned it, you don't want the glass to be exposed for too long because you don't want any dust or anything to get over it. Because like I mentioned, you already did your final squeegee on it. So, unless I walk away for, a few minutes, I might hit it again. But, for what I did, I'm just ready to go. So we're rolling it up, back rolling it. And then this is how we're going to peel that adhesive off. So the liner always has to be up towards you. We want to roll it nice and tight because otherwise if it's loose, it's going to be a lot more difficult to roll it down the window. And you don't want to have to touch it too much. But we're just peeling that backing off. I make sure I spray both sides. If you spray both sides, it makes it so much easier when it comes to the adhesive. It's not going to stick on you. Plus you're kind of keeping your hands wet, so it's not sticking to your fingertips or anything. We get the glass nice and wet. Try to keep from fully spraying the edges because we want to make sure that we don't wash all the dirt from the edges into the center where we're going to be putting the film on. But just lay it up. Now, from the box, the film is going to have at least one straight edge if you're cutting. If it's a 45-inch slider and you're using a 48-inch roll of film, then you're going to have a straight edge on either side. Now, you probably don't want 3 extra inches to work with because it's a lot of space, because any extra space that you have exposed, it can stick on things like like on the left, this frame, it's kind of deep. So if I have like an extra 2 inches, it's probably going to stick on that. Now I'll actually spray the edges where, like, if I'm going over a handle, like on the right side of this slider, you can see there's a handle. Now, if I spray it, if the film touches it, it's not going to stick to it. You know, because otherwise if the film sticks and you're not wiping off the handle, you're probably going to pull a bunch of dirt, you know, from under the film that's off the handle. So you're just making sure it's laying nice and clean. Make sure it's overlapped a little bit on the edges. And then we're going to be tacking it up. And I go across and down just to make sure that the film is not moving up and down, but it's also not going side to side. Because there's nothing worse than, you know, you think it's all tacked up. Maybe you're doing like, you know, a 90-something inch window by 55 inches. And you think it's all tacked up, and you go to cut one of the edges, and then there's, you know, some extra space exposed. Now, you can fix it if you only cut maybe 1 or 2 edges, but if you cut 3 edges and the top is exposed, or, you know, one of the edges, you're not going to be able to move that film any. So I always start at the bottom, again, because I'm at the bottom. So if I'm down there, I might as well just cut the bottom real quick. But we're cutting that piece off, and I'm using a card just to make sure that there's enough space at the bottom of the glass, because all that water is going to go to the bottom. I'm cutting off a little piece of blade. I want to make sure that we're always cutting with as sharp of a razor's edge as we can get, just to ensure that the blade is, you know, kind of gliding over the film. We don't want to put a lot of pressure on it, because pressure is going to equal a tear, especially if your blade is dull. And it really shouldn't take very much pressure at all. This is where I say it's good to cut with, you know, your left hand and the right hand. Just because the way the edge is, it'd be a little bit more awkward to do it with my right hand. Although you could do it, but you're not always going to be able to do that when you're, you know, 20, 25 feet up on a ladder and you're already pretty extended. I'm cutting the edges off, a little excess. I'm going to spray it one more time. And this is going to be our final, like, hard squeegee. This is like all the extra water that's on the outside, we're pushing it out. Or on the edges, we're pushing it out, sorry. And here's another trick. Like, kind of the reason that I push it all out after the film has been cut is because, you know, if you have an edge that's still overlapping and you push all the water from the center to the edges, if you didn't get the edges perfectly clean, as soon as the water hits it, when you go to tack it down with the squeegee, it's going to suck up all that dirty water. So this is why you should be wiping everything off with a paper towel, just to make sure, you know, if you accidentally do it or do push too much water, it's always going to be clean. Now, you know, these are just easy plastic, like, outside frames with a little bit of silicone, so these aren't very difficult. But, you know, if you're doing like older sliders or anything wood frame, you have to make sure that the edges are going to be super clean. Otherwise, you're going to start to get little pieces of wood, and, you know, once you start to get more than 1 or 2 pieces of something under the film, it's going to be a complete nightmare. And then we do our final soft squeegee, and then everything's nice and clean, and then we're going to come back with a card and tuck the edges. And you have to tuck the edges. You know, if I'm trying to move fast, I might do this last stage at the end just to make sure I'm not doing everything twice, because even though you do this once right after you finish each panel of glass, you're definitely going to have to come back when the job is, you know, like you're doing your final checks on the job, and you're going to have to push it down again, because just, you know, it's a big slider, lots of water's used, and it's pulling everything to the bottom, and you don't want it to finger up. Always keep your workspace clean up the trash. That's why it's good to have a little pop-up trash can. Makes it easier. You don't have to bend over quite as much. But that's it.